Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last fall, I traveled with the Standing Committee on Finance across the country as a part of the pre-budget consultations. We heard from academics and business leaders, from farmers and trade unions, from students and senior citizens. One thing that they had in common was a concern about the direction of Canada's finance. When the previous Conservative government left office, the nation's budget was balanced. We had come out of a difficult recession when the government had been compelled to put billions of dollars into economic stimulus measures. That sort of spending was no longer necessary in 2015. The Conservative government had the economy in good shape. We had weathered the recession, and Canada had been praised internationally for the soundness of its banking system and the economic policies of its government. What a difference 18 months can make. Now we have a government that hasn't a clue about fiscal management, led by a prime minister who believes in some magical way that budgets balance themselves. If he truly believed that, then we can expect no new taxes when the Minister of Finance rises in the House of Commons tomorrow to table his new budget. Canadians who are already struggling at this government has increased the tax burden on the middle class will have nothing to fear. There will be no carbon tax on seniors and students. And by the way, that carbon tax that's raising the price of everything almost that the Canadians doing or touching. Those of us who live in the real world know better. We know that this government has spending problem and not a revenue problem. There isn't a trendy program at home or internationally that is not supported by this government with a huge chunks of taxpayers' dollars. No one on the government side ever asks if Canada can afford this reckless spending. No one on the government side asks how the endless borrowing will be repaid. They expect the Conservatives to clean up after their fiscal mess when we win the next election in 2019. Mr. Speaker, will the Minister of Finance admit to this House that the problem is not one of inadequate government revenues? Ask anyone. As I had the opportunity to do so as the Finance Committee traveled the country, they will tell you that taxes are already too high and the government wastes the money it does receive. Will the Minister commit to not raising taxes on hard-working Canadians until he's able to get his fiscal house in order? Can the Minister tell this House when he expects he will be able to bring government spending under control and balance the budget? Or will he continue to pretend that borrowed money never had to be paid back? How can the government promote thrift and savings to Canadian citizens where it refuses to lead by example? Where is the credibility in that? Before the people of Edmonton Manning asked me to represent them in this House, I was a business owner, an entrepreneur. I can read a balance sheet. I understand about profit and loss. I know about the need to return on investment if a business is to be successful. In the early years of a business, as a company is getting established, it's not surprising if operating costs are high and the business does not turn a profit. There are capital expenditures upfront perhaps, or extra personnel cost in launching a new venture. But after a few years, if the business is well run, it starts to turn a profit, and that profit makes up for losses in the early years. Government is not the same thing as a business. There is no profit and loss in serving the public, but some of the principles are the same and supposed to be the same. A business that is always in the red does not stay in business very long. When you have to always borrow money to stay afloat, it is a sure sign of bad management. And eventually, no one will loan you any more money and you have to shut down. When a government runs deficit after deficit, always borrowing money to pay for its spending, the cost of borrowings goes up every year and each year, and eventually lenders are unwilling to extend any more credits unless there's a plan to repay the money. Not just a theoretical plan, but something that the government actually is required to stick to. Those people who lend money, especially the major international lenders who deal in the billions, know very well that budgets do not balance themselves. Someone had to take charge and reduce spending. Will the Minister of Finance be that person who says enough to fiscal insanity, to deficits 3 times their election promises? I really hope so. But given his track record, the track record of this party, I'm not very optimistic. I'm the proud father of 2 sons, young men just beginning to make their place in the world. I know how difficult it can be to get established in the workforce. At times, it seems like employers want to hire young people only if they have 20 years experience. It is tough to get started in this world in a career. When the minister presents his budget tomorrow, I hope he takes that into account. Canada has abundance of smart, educated young people who are employed and underemployed through no fault of their own. The job market is tough, especially as businesses are reluctant to expand because of the ever-increasing tax burden they face. No one is tougher than Canadian youth, but whether they have just finished their education or are taking time off school to save money for it, young Canadians are having difficulties finding meaningful work. Given such a situation, one would expect the government to address the youth unemployment crisis, to take immediate measures to encourage companies to hire young Canadians. This is the sort of thing that you'd expect government to do. One of those areas where profit and loss are not measured the same way they would be in business. Money spent on such a program would have long-term benefits in the health of the country. It would provide young Canadians with that all-important first job in their choosing field. And I would not be surprised, Mr. Speaker, if the Minister of Finance does include something like that in his budget. It would be the right thing to do. People will praise him and the government for their actions. But what he won't tell young Canadians, what they will have to figure out for themselves, is that he's merely loaning them this money to get them started. The government, due to reckless spending decisions already made, doesn't have the money to support our youth. If it wants to do anything to deal with youth unemployment, it will have to borrow the cash. It will use that money with no plan on how to pay back. It will be left to future generations, those just starting in the workforce now and those for years yet to come, to pay this bill plus interest. So it is with anything this government does. You don't need to pay now, but you will pay later, much later, and much more once you add all the compound interest. Mr. Speaker, it would be nice to see fiscal sanity return to this House when the minister tables his budget. Is that too much to hope for? Thank you.